The movie opens with Mike Banning taking part in an intense military training exercise. Moving through a large tactical facility, he clears one room after another, overpowering every hostile soldier who steps into his path. Mike is only moments away from reaching the final exit when Wade Jennings, one of his own teammates, suddenly shoots him and brings the drill to an end. Bruno, another member of the unit, immediately starts shouting at Mike for deliberately knocking him down on the staircase. Mike refuses to apologize. He argues that these exercises need to feel as dangerous and unpredictable as real combat. In his eyes, training gently would only get them killed once actual bullets started flying. Afterward, Mike and Jennings walk together and discuss Jennings' private military company, Salient Global. Their conversation soon turns toward rumors that Mike may be chosen as the next director of the Secret Service. Jennings sees an opportunity and asks his old friend to help Salient Global secure a government contract to train agents in tactical operations. Mike does not promise anything directly, but he agrees to put in a good word and see what he can do. Although Mike still appears strong and capable, his health has quietly started falling apart. He has been suffering from painful migraines, severe insomnia, and other physical problems caused by years of injuries and constant combat. He has visited several doctors, but he has kept the situation hidden from President Alan Trumbull and even from his wife, Lee. One physician warned him that his body is reaching its limit and described him as a catastrophe waiting to happen. With those health concerns hanging over him, along with the responsibility of raising his young daughter Lynn, Mike is not completely convinced that becoming director is the right decision. The position would bring more authority, but it would also place even greater pressure on a man already struggling to hold himself together. During a White House press conference, President Trumbull speaks publicly about his commitment to diplomacy and peaceful international relations. Mike stands nearby beside David Gentry, the current director of the Secret Service, while Trumbull explains that he wants to avoid unnecessary wars and pursue cooperation instead of military escalation. Not long afterward, Trumbull invites Mike and several members of the protection detail to join him on a fishing trip. While the agents keep watch around the lake, the president privately speaks with Mike and officially offers him the position of Secret Service Director. Despite his earlier doubts, Mike is honored by the offer and happily accepts. Their peaceful conversation is suddenly interrupted when the men notice what appears to be a dark cloud of bats moving rapidly across the sky. Within seconds, they realize the objects are not animals at all. They are small weaponized drones heading directly toward the president. The swarm closes in and immediately opens fire. Agents are torn apart by bullets and explosions before they have time to respond. Boats erupt in flames, men are blasted into the water, and the entire security detail is thrown into chaos. Mike reacts instantly, covering Trumbull with his own body before pulling him overboard. The two men plunge beneath the surface and remain underwater, using the lake to hide from the drones scanning above them. Mike manages to guide the president away from the main attack and toward a safer location. However, both men are badly injured and eventually lose consciousness. Rescue teams later recover them and rush them to the hospital. Trumbull survives the assassination attempt but falls into a coma, leaving Vice President Martin Kirby to temporarily assume control as acting president. Mike is also hospitalized while recovering from the attack. Lee arrives at the medical center with baby Lynn, desperate to see her husband. Before Mike can spend much time with his family, FBI agent Helen Thompson enters the room and begins questioning him. Her tone makes it clear that Mike is no longer being treated as a hero or a victim. He is now the primary suspect. Thompson reveals that investigators located the van used to launch and control the drone swarm. Inside it, forensic teams discovered traces of Mike's hair and skin cells. They also found explosive residue that matches material recovered from his garage. To the FBI, the evidence suggests that Mike may have helped organize the attack against the president he was supposed to protect. Mike insists that someone has planted the evidence and is deliberately framing him. Thompson, however, is unwilling to accept his explanation without proof. From her perspective, the physical evidence is too strong to ignore. Only a short time later, Mike is escorted out of the hospital in handcuffs and placed in federal custody. A convoy begins transporting him to a secure facility, but during the journey, every vehicle suddenly loses power. The engines shut down, the lights go dark, and the convoy is left stranded. A heavily armed team then ambushes the escort. The attackers quickly eliminate the federal agents and drag Mike from the vehicle. They intend to take him somewhere else, but Mike fights back inside their transport van. During the struggle, he causes the driver to lose control, sending the vehicle crashing violently into a tree. As Mike searches the wreckage, he recognizes one of the attackers as Bruno, the same man who took part in the training exercise earlier. That discovery immediately connects the ambush to Salient Global and makes Mike suspect that Jennings, the man he considered a friend, may also be involved. Mike takes weapons and supplies from the dead attackers before disappearing into the surrounding area. When the authorities later reach the crash site, they find the escort officers and members of the hit squad dead, while Mike is nowhere to be seen. The scene makes it appear that he murdered everyone and escaped custody, strengthening the case against him. The truth is soon revealed to the audience. Wade Jennings is the mastermind behind the drone assault. He deliberately collected Mike's DNA during the earlier training exercise and planted it inside the command van so that every piece of evidence would lead investigators directly to Mike. Now a fugitive, Mike reaches a petrol station and uses a payphone to contact Leigh. He tells her that he is alive and tries to reassure her that he had nothing to do with the attack. The FBI traces the call, while Leigh warns Mike that she and Lynn have been receiving frightening death threats. Before they can say more, Mike notices two armed men approaching him. They have recognized him from the news and plan to capture him for the reward. Mike quickly ends the call, disarms both men, and steals their truck. The authorities soon spot the vehicle. Mike drives aggressively while police units close in behind him. Eventually, he sends the truck crashing off the road and into the forest, then abandons it and continues running through the woods on foot. Back in Washington, acting President Kirby meets with senior White House officials to discuss the possibility that the Russian government was involved in the attempt on Trumbull's life. They consider several military responses and debate how aggressively the United States should retaliate. Kirby later appears before the press and publicly declares that Mike Banning participated in the assassination attempt. He claims investigators discovered that $10 million had been transferred from Russia into an offshore account connected to Mike. According to Kirby, the evidence proves that Mike worked with Moscow to eliminate President Trumbull. Kirby then announces that his administration will employ a private military contractor to support a retaliatory operation against Russia. With police and federal agents searching everywhere, Mike steals another van and drives far into the wilderness. His destination is the hidden home of his estranged father, Clay Banning. Clay is a decorated former Marine who abandoned Mike when he was still a child and has lived completely outside society for many years. Although Clay believes no one knows where he is, Mike secretly tracked him down long ago and has always been aware of his location. Deep inside the forest, Clay now lives alone in a remote cabin, isolated from the government, technology, and nearly everyone else in the world. Mike finally tells his father everything: how he has been framed for the attack on President Trumbull, how the entire country now believes he is a traitor, and how the real people behind it are still hunting him. Even with his life in danger, Mike cannot hide the bitterness he still carries toward Clay for walking out on him and his mother many years earlier. Their reunion is tense, filled with old resentment that neither man has ever truly dealt with. While Mike and Clay are talking, Jennings succeeds in tracing Mike's location to the remote cabin. Determined to eliminate the only person who can expose the truth, he sends a heavily armed Salient Global team into the forest to finish the job. Clay's property, however, is far more secure than it appears. Using surveillance cameras positioned around the area, Mike and Clay spot the approaching mercenaries before they reach the cabin. Clay immediately leads his son into a concealed underground passage and tells him to remain perfectly still. Mike is unsure what his father has planned, but Clay clearly knows every inch of the surrounding woods. Once the attackers move into position, Clay triggers a series of explosives hidden around the perimeter. The first blast tears through several men. Before the survivors can recover, another explosion erupts nearby. Then Clay activates another charge, followed by one final detonation, just to make certain no one is left standing. Mike stares at his father in complete disbelief. He knew Clay had military experience, but he never expected the isolated old man to have turned the entire forest into a massive defensive trap. Within moments, every mercenary Jennings sent after them has been wiped out. The next morning, Clay shows Mike a radio broadcast carrying acting President Kirby's public statement. Kirby continues blaming Mike for the assassination attempt and claims the evidence proves he was working with Russia. By now, Mike has connected every piece of the conspiracy. He contacts Jennings directly and confronts him, making it clear that he knows his former friend arranged the attack and planted the evidence. Jennings does not deny what he has done. The purpose of the operation was never simply to kill Trumbull. Jennings wanted to push the United States into another major war. Once that conflict began, Salient Global would receive enormous government contracts, new clients, and years of profitable military work. Mike and Clay leave the cabin and drive away from the forest. During a stop for fuel, Mike hears a report on the radio saying that Trumbull may soon wake from his coma. Instead of feeling relieved, Mike immediately becomes more concerned. He knows Jennings cannot allow the president to regain consciousness because Trumbull could destroy the entire false narrative surrounding the attack. As they continue traveling, Mike talks about Lee and Lynn and the danger they are now facing because of him. Clay reminds his son that he still has a family worth fighting for. His words also reveal how much regret he carries over abandoning Mike and Mike's mother. Meanwhile, FBI agent Helen Thompson and her partner reach the scene where Clay's explosives killed the Salient operatives. After examining the bodies and equipment, Thompson begins reconsidering everything she believed about Mike. She knows Salient Global's history and understands the kind of illegal operations private military companies have carried out before. The evidence at the cabin makes her suspect that Mike may genuinely have been framed and that Jennings could be the one behind the entire conspiracy. Jennings soon learns that Trumbull is beginning to recover. He then receives a call from the person secretly directing the operation, Acting President Kirby. Kirby orders Jennings to move quickly and make certain Trumbull never gets the chance to reveal what happened. Jennings immediately sends another team to Mike's home, this time targeting Lee and Lynn. Two armed men enter the house and force Lee and her daughter outside. Just as they are about to take them away, Clay suddenly appears and kills both attackers before they can escape. Lee is shocked by the arrival of a man she has never met. Clay introduces himself as Mike's father and openly admits that he abandoned Mike and his mother when Mike was young. He does not attempt to excuse what he did. Instead, he expresses genuine remorse and promises Lee that whatever happens next, he will protect both her and Lynn. At the same time, Thompson and her partner fly to Salient Global's base to confront Jennings. They believe they now have enough evidence to expose him and clear Mike's name. When they arrive, Jennings quickly realizes the FBI agents have uncovered the truth. Rather than allowing them to leave, he murders both Thompson and her partner, eliminating two more people who could connect him to the attack. Mike, meanwhile, makes his way toward the hospital where Trumbull is being treated. He is convinced another assault is coming and knows there is little time left. Because the authorities still consider him a dangerous fugitive, Mike cannot simply walk through the entrance. He tricks several officers, overpowers one of them, and uses the man as a hostage so he can force his way deeper into the building. At nearly the same moment, President Trumbull finally wakes from his coma. Mike reaches the upper floors but is quickly surrounded and taken into custody. When Trumbull learns that Mike has been captured inside the hospital, he orders the agents to bring him into the room. Standing before the president, Mike insists that he had nothing to do with the drone attack and explains that Jennings and Salient Global framed him. Trumbull believes him. He knows Mike personally, and more importantly, he understands that he would never have survived the original attack without Mike risking his own life to save him. While studying the hospital's systems, Mike notices unusual activity and realizes Salient technicians are hacking into the building's computers. Gas is being released into certain sections, and the security systems are being manipulated remotely. Mike quickly understands their plan. The gas is intended to create a massive explosion that will destroy the hospital and kill Trumbull while making the event appear accidental. The evacuation alarm is raised, and agents begin clearing everyone from the building. Salient's technical team detects the sudden movement and informs Jennings that the hospital is being emptied. Jennings immediately realizes Mike reached Trumbull before his men could complete the operation. Soon afterward, Jennings arrives with a heavily armed group of mercenaries. A violent gunfight breaks out between the Secret Service and the Salient operatives. Bullets tear through the corridors as Mike stays close to Trumbull, moving him through the building, while Jennings pushes forward with the intention of killing both men himself. Moments later, the intensive care section erupts in a devastating explosion. Fire and debris rip through the hospital, destroying much of the area where Trumbull had been recovering. Mike manages to get the president away from the blast and leaves him under Gentry's protection. Gentry has been injured, but he is still capable of keeping Trumbull secure while Mike turns back to face the attackers. Moving through the damaged building, Mike hunts down the remaining Salient agents one by one. He shoots several men, stabs others in close combat, and uses additional explosions to eliminate nearly the entire assault team. A military response unit eventually arrives and takes out the few mercenaries still fighting. Realizing the operation has failed, Jennings runs toward a helicopter and attempts to escape. Mike refuses to let him get away. He attacks the aircraft and causes it to explode before it can carry Jennings to safety. With the helicopter destroyed, Mike and Jennings finally confront each other directly. No soldiers, drones, or hired gunmen remain between them. The two former friends agree to settle everything in a one-on-one fight. Their battle is brutal and personal. Jennings fights desperately, but Mike ultimately overpowers him and drives a blade into his body. He leaves Jennings on the ground, bleeding heavily until he finally dies from his wounds. After the truth comes out, every charge against Mike is dropped, and he is officially cleared of involvement in the assassination attempt. Trumbull and Gentry also uncover Kirby's connection to Jennings and Salient Global. Kirby is removed from the White House and arrested for his role in the conspiracy, including his attempt to start a war for political and financial gain. With the danger finally over, Clay is welcomed into Mike's home. Lee allows him to stay with the family, giving him a chance to rebuild his relationship with his son and recover some of the years they lost. Mike later meets privately with President Trumbull. He admits that he hid the truth about his migraines, insomnia, and declining physical condition. Because of that dishonesty, Mike believes he failed in his duty and tells Trumbull that he should resign from the Secret Service. Trumbull refuses to hold it against him. He understands why Mike kept his condition hidden and forgives him. He then reminds Mike that the offer to become director of the Secret Service still stands. This time, with his name cleared and his family safe, Mike accepts the position. Angel Has Fallen is one of those movies where the reaction probably says more about what you wanted from it than what the movie actually delivers. Some people watched this and saw a tired third installment dragging an old action formula back onto the screen. Others saw exactly the kind of loud, uncomplicated thriller they had been missing. And honestly, I understand both sides. If you go into this expecting a smart political conspiracy with carefully hidden villains, believable government procedures, and a story that constantly surprises you, the movie starts losing you pretty quickly. Most of the major developments are easy to predict. You can usually tell who should not be trusted, where the betrayal is coming from, and how Mike Banning is eventually going to clear his name. The film does not exactly play hard to get, but there is another way to watch it. You can accept that this is a Gerard Butler action movie where helicopters explode, bullets somehow miss the hero at the correct moments, and federal agencies become strangely ineffective whenever the story needs Banning to escape. Once you make peace with that, Angel Has Fallen becomes a much easier movie to enjoy. That seems to be where the audience split really comes from. The negative side sees a recycled fugitive story filled with cliches, weak logic, obvious villains, and effects that occasionally look cheaper than they should. For those viewers, the whole thing feels unnecessary. Olympus Has Fallen already gave us the strongest version of this character. London Has Fallen pushed the destruction further, and now the third film appears to be rearranging familiar pieces without finding a genuinely new reason to exist. And that criticism is fair. There are moments where the writing feels incredibly lazy. Characters ignore obvious information, investigators overlook things that should be impossible to miss, and the conspiracy depends on nearly everyone behaving just badly enough for the plot to continue. You can feel the screenplay moving people into position rather than allowing events to unfold naturally. Still, I cannot pretend the film is completely boring, because it really is not. There is a steady amount of action, the story is easy to follow, and the movie rarely forgets what kind of audience it is playing to. It knows people came for Gerard Butler looking exhausted while surviving situations that should probably kill him several times over. It knows they want explosions, car chases, gunfights, betrayal, and Morgan Freeman delivering serious dialogue while everything around him falls apart, and it gives them all of that. A surprising number of viewers actually consider this better than London Has Fallen, and I can see why. It feels slightly more personal. There is more attention on Mike Banning as a damaged, aging man rather than just an unstoppable bodyguard moving from one attack to another. That little bit of character focus gives the movie more weight than it might have had otherwise. Then again, some people rank it as the weakest film of the trilogy. Others call it the best. That is how strange the reaction has been. Personally, I think the truth sits somewhere in the middle. Angel Has Fallen is not a great action film, but it is not the disaster its harshest critics make it sound like either. It is predictable, over the top, technically uneven, and sometimes ridiculous. It is also watchable, energetic, and occasionally more entertaining than it has any right to be. The biggest mistake would be taking it too seriously. This is not the kind of movie that invites deep analysis after the credits. You are probably not going to spend the next week thinking about its political themes or carefully constructed character arcs. You may not even remember every detail a few days later, but while it is playing, there is a decent chance you will be pulled along by the pace, the noise, and the sheer confidence with which it throws one absurd situation after another at Mike Banning. So the divide makes sense. For some viewers, familiar means lazy. For others, familiar means comfortable. Angel Has Fallen lands directly in that gap. It is a movie that can feel completely disposable and strangely satisfying at the same time. That may not sound like glowing praise, but for this kind of action movie, it is probably the most honest compliment I can give. The main setup is simple enough. President Trumbull is attacked, almost everyone around him is killed, and Mike Banning somehow becomes the prime suspect. Not exactly the best day at work. Banning survives the drone strike along with the president, but instead of being treated like the man who nearly died protecting him, he wakes up accused of planning the entire assassination attempt. Evidence has conveniently appeared, federal agents are already convinced, and suddenly the most trusted man in the Secret Service is public enemy number one. It is a familiar setup, obviously. The loyal agent gets framed, nobody believes him, and now he has to escape custody while hunting down the people responsible. You have seen versions of this story before, probably more than once. The film does not hide that. It basically takes Mike Banning out of his usual position as the president's shield and turns him into the man every government agency is chasing. That change does give the third movie a slightly different energy. In the first two films, Banning was usually running toward the danger. Here, he spends a large part of the story trying to stay alive long enough to understand what is happening. He cannot trust the people around him, he cannot contact his family safely, and he has no idea how far the conspiracy reaches. Friends might be enemies, government officials might be involved. Even asking for help could expose his location. Of course, the movie never makes the mystery as complicated as it wants us to believe. The real villains are not exactly hiding in the shadows. You can probably work out who is involved long before Banning does. Still, the idea of turning him into a fugitive works because it forces the character into a more vulnerable situation. He is already physically struggling before the attack happens. His body is worn down, he is hiding medical problems, and he has started wondering how much longer he can continue doing this job. Then, without warning, everything he has built his life around is taken away. His reputation is destroyed, his family is placed in danger, and the country he has repeatedly protected suddenly sees him as a traitor. That part is more interesting than the conspiracy itself. Banning is not just trying to stop another attack. He is fighting to prove that his entire life has not been a lie. He has sacrificed his health for the president, survived impossible situations, and remained loyal through all of it. Now the same system he served is hunting him down based on evidence that feels almost too perfect. The film could have explored that betrayal more deeply, and honestly, I wish it had. There is something compelling about a man who has given everything to his job, discovering how quickly the government can turn against him. But Angel Has Fallen is still an action movie first, so it does not sit with that idea for very long. Before long, Banning is escaping transports, running through forests, stealing vehicles, and surviving another group of armed men. That is where the movie is most comfortable. The fugitive angle also allows Banning to rely on the skills we normally only see during presidential emergencies. He has to think quickly, disappear when necessary, use the environment, and stay ahead of both trained investigators and professional killers. The movie keeps reminding us that even when he is injured and exhausted, this is still a man who has spent years preparing for worst-case scenarios. Naturally, some of his escapes are ridiculous. Authorities make questionable decisions, security disappears whenever the plot requires it, and Banning survives enough damage to make you wonder whether he is secretly indestructible. But the chase does keep the movie moving. There is also something satisfying about watching everyone slowly realize they may have arrested the wrong man. Banning knows he is innocent, the audience knows he is innocent, and the tension comes from waiting for the rest of the characters to catch up. It is not subtle, but it gives the story a clear direction. The president is unconscious, the real attackers are still operating, and the one man who might be able to stop them is being hunted by his own people. That is the engine of the movie. It may not be original, and it is definitely not difficult to follow, but it gives Gerard Butler exactly the kind of role this series knows how to use. He gets to be bruised, angry, suspicious, and constantly one step away from being captured or killed. By the time Banning starts putting the pieces together, the film has fully committed to its central idea. The president's most loyal protector, must become a fugitive in order to save him one more time. The biggest problem with Angel Has Fallen is not that the conspiracy is complicated. It is that the movie acts like it is complicated when most viewers are already several steps ahead. Very early on, you start looking at certain characters and thinking, yeah, that person is definitely involved. Then the film keeps moving as though it has successfully hidden everything. It has not. The suspicious conversations are suspicious, the helpful friend feels a little too helpful, and the political figures who should remain in the background practically announce that they are waiting for their villain reveal. There is no real guessing game here. The basic formula is one Hollywood has used for decades. A loyal government operative is framed for a crime he did not commit. The evidence against him is overwhelming. His own people refuse to listen. He escapes, goes underground, and has to solve the case himself while being chased by both law enforcement and the actual criminals. It is the fugitive with heavier weapons. There is also a bit of enemy of the state in the surveillance and government pursuit. Some die hard in the one-man resistance, and a little taken in the way Gerard Butler moves through every problem with a combination of anger, pain, and extreme violence. None of those comparisons automatically make the film bad. Action movies borrow from each other constantly. The issue is that Angel Has Fallen rarely adds enough of its own personality to make the recycled structure feel fresh. You know the mercenaries are not operating alone. You know someone inside the government is helping them. You know the attack on the president is part of a larger plan. And you know Mike Banning will eventually discover that one of the people closest to him cannot be trusted. The movie keeps treating these developments as major revelations, but they land more like confirmations. You are not shocked. You are sitting there waiting for Banning to catch up. That can be frustrating, especially because the opening drone attack suggests something more inventive. It is a strong setup. The threat feels modern, coordinated, and frighteningly efficient. For a moment, it seems like the movie may build a conspiracy around technology, private warfare, and the vulnerability of presidential security. Then it settles into the usual pattern: corrupt insiders, private contractors, political ambition, a plan to create chaos, control the narrative, and seize more power. We have been here before, and the film does not do much to disguise the route. Even the villains behave like people who know they are in an action movie. They explain too much, underestimate Banning constantly, and make decisions that seem designed to give him another opportunity to escape. They have access to weapons, intelligence, trained soldiers, and government connections, yet they still struggle to eliminate one injured man who can barely sleep without pain. That is part of the fun, I suppose. These movies are built around the idea that Mike Banning is always the most capable person in the room. It does not matter how many enemies surround him or how carefully the conspiracy has been planned. Eventually, someone will make a mistake, Banning will notice it, and the entire operation will begin collapsing. The problem is that predictability removes some of the tension. When the movie introduces a new character, you immediately start sorting them into two groups: future ally or obvious traitor. When someone gives Banning advice, you question their motive. When a politician makes a serious speech, you wait for the camera to hold on them slightly too long. The film's mystery is not really a mystery. It is a checklist. Still, there is a reason this formula survives. It works. A framed hero gives the story instant momentum. He cannot simply report what happened because nobody believes him. He cannot go home because his family is being watched. He cannot trust the system because the system has already decided he is guilty. Every normal option is taken away, leaving only the action movie option: escape, investigate, and fight back. That structure is easy to understand, and Angel Has Fallen benefits from that simplicity. You never lose track of what Banning is trying to do. He needs to identify the attackers, prove the evidence was planted, protect the president, and expose whoever is controlling the operation. Clean, direct, no confusion. For viewers who just want a fast thriller, that is probably enough. The villains may be obvious, but the chase still works. The betrayal may be predictable, but it gives Butler something personal to react to. The government conspiracy may feel recycled, but it provides a reason for Banning to fight his way through forests, roads, safe houses, and eventually a hospital. The film is not trying to reinvent the political thriller. It is trying to use a familiar structure to keep the action moving, and sometimes familiarity can be comfortable. You know what kind of movie this is. You know the innocent hero will eventually be believed. You know the bad guys will become more reckless as their plan falls apart. You know there will be a final confrontation where Banning pushes his damaged body far beyond anything medically reasonable. The surprise is not in what happens. It is in how loudly it happens. That is probably the fairest way to look at the conspiracy. As a mystery, it is weak. As a framework for action, it does the job. You may spot the mastermind almost immediately. You may predict every betrayal before the characters do. You may even recognize entire scenes from better movies. But Angel Has Fallen keeps moving with enough confidence that, for a while, you can stop asking where you have seen this before and just watch Mike Banning tear through it again. There is suspending disbelief, and then there is watching Mike Banning survive Angel Has Fallen. The movie tells us repeatedly that this man is physically breaking down. He has suffered multiple concussions, his back is giving him trouble, he cannot sleep properly, and he is secretly relying on pain medication just to keep functioning. That is actually an interesting direction for the character. For once, Banning is not presented as an indestructible action figure, at least not until somebody starts shooting at him. The second the action begins, most of those health problems quietly step aside. He crashes, falls, gets beaten, escapes armed convoys, runs through the woods, fights trained mercenaries, and somehow keeps moving like his body has a special agreement with the screenplay. He will look exhausted afterward, of course. Gerard Butler makes sure of that. There is usually some heavy breathing, a painful expression, maybe a hand pressed against his side. Then the next attack begins, and Banning is back to doing things that would put a perfectly healthy person in intensive care. That is not necessarily unusual for this genre. Action heroes have been surviving impossible injuries forever. The difference here is that the film specifically makes Banning's declining health part of the story, then becomes strangely selective about when it matters. His condition is serious during conversations. During gunfights, not so much. And Banning is not the only source of questionable logic. The entire conspiracy depends on government agencies becoming unbelievably incompetent at exactly the right moments. After the drone attack, evidence against Banning appears almost immediately. It is so complete, so perfectly arranged, and so convenient that somebody should probably pause and ask whether it was planted. Instead, the investigation moves at action movie speed. Banning is treated as guilty before anyone seems willing to seriously consider how the president's most trusted protector could organize an enormous attack while standing directly inside it. He nearly gets killed along with everyone else, but apparently that is not suspicious enough. Then there is the matter of the attackers themselves. At different points, armed men are killed, vehicles are abandoned, equipment is left behind, and entire crime scenes exist that should contain mountains of useful information. Yet investigators struggle to identify the organization responsible. These are not ghosts. They are heavily armed contractors arriving in trucks with weapons, communications equipment, and bodies that presumably have fingerprints, dental records, military histories, or something. But the plot needs the FBI to remain behind Banning, so basic investigative progress happens very slowly. The authorities are brilliant when they need to locate him, and strangely helpless when they need to examine anything that might prove his innocence. There is also a moment when Banning reaches a phone after escaping and contacts his family, knowing perfectly well that the call is probably being monitored. He already has important information about the people hunting him. This would seem like a good time to mention names, give a warning, or share anything useful before the call is traced. He does not. Instead, the scene stretches out the emotional tension while leaving the audience wondering why a highly trained Secret Service agent is refusing to say the one thing that could change the investigation. Maybe he is worried about putting his family in more danger. Fair enough, but the movie does not make the reasoning convincing. It just needs Banning to remain isolated for a little longer. That happens quite a lot. Characters do not always make choices because those choices are believable. They make them because the next action scene is waiting. Security around President Trumbull is another problem. After an assassination attempt wipes out almost his entire protection team, you would expect the hospital to become the most secure building in the country. Every entrance should be covered. Every employee should be checked. Nobody should get close to the president without passing through layers of armed protection. Naturally, the villains still find a way inside. Not quietly either. The situation eventually becomes a full-scale attack involving gunfire, explosives, evacuations, and enough destruction to justify the unofficial title "Hospital Has Fallen." It is a great setting for the final act. It is not a particularly convincing display of presidential security. The film also asks us to believe that a large conspiracy involving private soldiers, advanced drone technology, planted financial records, government insiders, manipulated evidence, and a political takeover can operate smoothly until Banning starts chasing it. Then everyone involved suddenly becomes careless. The villains talk too freely. They underestimate him. They leave openings. They repeatedly send groups of armed men into situations where Mike can eliminate them one by one. A plan complicated enough to fool the entire federal government is gradually defeated because nobody involved understands that Banning has already survived 2 movies. At this point, that should be the first page of the villain briefing. Do not assume he is dead, do not stand close enough for him to grab your weapon, and definitely do not explain the plan while he is still breathing. Clay Banning's property gives the movie some of its most enjoyable absurdity. Mike's father has been living off the grid for years, preparing for exactly the kind of armed invasion that normal people generally do not expect. His land is wired with explosives, traps, surveillance, and enough defensive preparation to turn his isolated home into a small war zone. Is it realistic? Probably not. Is it entertaining when the mercenaries discover they have walked into the paranoid survivalist version of Disneyland? Absolutely. That sequence works because the movie finally embraces its nonsense. Clay is not pretending to be a normal man with a normal house. He is a traumatized veteran who has spent years expecting the government or somebody else to come after him. When heavily armed men finally arrive, he almost seems relieved that all the preparation was not wasted. The ridiculousness becomes part of the character. Other moments are harder to forgive. Roads seem to change size when a chase requires more space. Escape routes remain strangely unguarded. Federal agents monitor a house but fail to cover the most obvious way out. Computer systems provide information whenever the screenplay needs a quick answer, even when the person accessing them does not appear remotely qualified to do so. Every action movie bends reality. Angel Has Fallen sometimes folds it in half and puts it in a drawer. The most impressive piece of plot armor, though, is still Mike himself. He survives the drone attack because the story needs him alive. He survives custody, transport, pursuit, crashes, explosions, gunfights, close combat, and the final hospital assault because that is what Mike Banning does. The film tries to convince us that he is reaching the end of the road, but it also cannot resist making him the toughest person in every scene. That creates a strange contradiction. We are supposed to worry that his body might fail him, yet years of franchise conditioning have taught us that almost nothing can kill this man. He could fall from a helicopter, hit a moving truck, roll through a burning building, and the main question would still be whether he had enough energy left for the final knife fight. The lack of realism will ruin the movie for some viewers. Once you start noticing the gaps, they keep piling up. Why is nobody checking this? Why would that character do that? How did the attackers get there? Why is the injured man still sprinting? There are many opportunities to ask sensible questions, and almost none of them improve the experience. For everyone else, the absurdity is part of the deal. Mike Banning is not operating in the real world. He lives in a universe where presidents are attacked every few years. One Secret Service agent repeatedly becomes the last line of defense, and explosions are less of an emergency than a normal part of the workday. Angel Has Fallen is easiest to enjoy once you accept that. The logic is shaky, the investigation is convenient, the security is unreliable, and Banning's body only remembers its injuries when the action takes a break. But somehow, against common sense and probably several laws of medicine, he keeps getting back up. At this stage, expecting anything else would be the least realistic part. The most interesting thing Angel Has Fallen does is admit that Mike Banning cannot keep doing this forever. He has spent 2 movies surviving terrorist attacks, collapsing buildings, gunfights, explosions, and enough physical damage to end several careers. In the earlier films, most of that was treated like part of the job. He got hurt, looked angry, and carried on. This time, the damage has stayed with him. Banning is dealing with migraines, insomnia, back pain, and the effects of repeated concussions. He takes medication in secret and avoids telling the people around him how bad things have become. Even before the assassination attempt, he looks like a man barely holding himself together. That immediately makes this version of the character more interesting. He is still capable. Nobody doubts that. He remains the president's most trusted agent and the person everyone expects to step forward when danger appears. But beneath that reputation, his body is beginning to resist the life he has chosen. You can see it in the way Gerard Butler carries himself. Banning is heavier, slower, and visibly more tired than before. He does not enter scenes with the confidence of a man who believes he can defeat anyone. He looks like someone calculating how much pain the next fight is going to cost him. And honestly, Butler looking rough works for the role. Some viewers criticized his appearance and said he looked older than expected, but that worn-out quality fits where Banning is supposed to be emotionally. A perfectly polished action hero would have made the health storyline feel fake. Butler looks like a man who has taken too many hits and refused to admit it. There is no glamour in the way he is presented. He wakes up exhausted. He struggles through training exercises. He hides medication. He knows something is wrong, but he also seems terrified of what happens if he finally says it out loud. because for Mike Banning, the job is not simply a job, it is the thing that defines him. He is the man who stands beside the president when everyone else runs. He is the person called when the situation becomes impossible. If he admits that his body can no longer handle the work, he is not just giving up a position. He is losing the identity that has shaped his entire adult life. That is why the possible promotion creates such an uncomfortable situation. On paper, moving into a leadership role should be the obvious next step. It would keep him close to the president while taking him away from the constant physical danger. His experience makes him qualified, and his body clearly needs the change. Yet Banning hesitates. Part of him knows he should accept. Another part still believes that leaving the front line means becoming less useful. He has built his value around being the man who takes the hit, enters the building, and personally stops the threat. Sitting behind a desk would require him to trust someone else to do that, and trust is not exactly his strongest quality. The movie does not explore this conflict as deeply as it could have. There is a more thoughtful story hiding inside Angel Has Fallen about aging, trauma, masculinity, and the fear of becoming unnecessary. Every now and then the film gets close to it, then something explodes. Still, the character material gives the action more weight than it had in London Has Fallen. Banning is no longer fighting only because the president is in danger. He is also trying to prove to himself that he still has something left. Being framed makes that struggle even more personal. At the exact moment when he is already questioning his future, the government strips away everything he thought he had earned. His loyalty is doubted. His reputation disappears overnight. The people he protected begin hunting him as a traitor. For a younger and more confident Banning, that would simply create anger. Here, it creates something closer to desperation. He is fighting to clear his name, of course, but he is also fighting against the possibility that his whole career may end in disgrace. After sacrificing his health for the country, he suddenly faces the chance that history will remember him as the man who tried to murder the president. That fear gives Butler more to work with than the usual grim determination. There are moments when Banning appears genuinely frightened, not because he thinks the mercenaries will kill him, but because he may not be able to protect his family or convince anyone of the truth. He is used to controlling dangerous situations. Now his own body is unreliable, the government is against him, and every person he contacts could be placed at risk. The character feels cornered in a way he did not before. Of course, Angel Has Fallen still wants him to behave like an action hero, so the vulnerability has limits. Once the shooting starts, his injuries become surprisingly flexible. He can run, fight, crash vehicles, survive explosions, and push through pain that should probably leave him unconscious. The movie wants the damaged man and the unstoppable warrior at the same time. That contradiction is hard to ignore, but it also reflects the way Banning sees himself. He knows he is hurt. He knows he is approaching the end. Yet every time danger appears, he forces himself back into the role he understands. Pain can wait, the mission cannot. It is not healthy, but it is believable for this particular character. Banning has no idea how to slow down. Even when he talks about leaving the job, it sounds less like a decision and more like something he hopes will somehow decide itself. He does not want to tell his wife the truth because she might force him to confront it. He does not want to tell the president because it could remove him from duty, so he keeps pretending. The relationship with his father helps explain some of that behavior. Clay Banning is another former soldier who never properly dealt with what his service did to him. He escaped society, isolated himself, and built an entire life around suspicion and survival. Mike chose a more respectable path, but the emotional pattern is not completely different. Both men carry trauma. Both avoid talking about it. Both treat preparation and physical strength as substitutes for emotional honesty. Mike may wear a suit and protect the president, while Clay lives in the woods surrounded by explosives, but neither of them knows how to live peacefully after war. That parallel gives Mike's condition more meaning. His father represents one possible future, a man who survives everything but loses his connection to normal life. Mike has a wife, a child, and a career, yet he is already hiding pain and withdrawing from the people closest to him. The danger is not only that his body will fail, it is that he may become emotionally unreachable long before that happens. This is where the film's more personal direction pays off. The series finally looks at the cost of turning one man into a permanent national savior. Banning has protected presidents and stopped catastrophic attacks, but the victories have left him damaged in ways medals and promotions cannot repair. He has become very good at surviving. Living is the part he seems less prepared for. Gerard Butler handles that side of the role better than some of the dialogue deserves. He is not giving a subtle psychological performance, but there is a real heaviness to him. Even when Banning says little, Butler makes it clear that the character is carrying more than physical pain. There is embarrassment in the way he hides his medication. There is fear behind his refusal to retire. And there is a strange sadness in watching him return to violence, because violence is the one place where he still feels completely certain of himself. The film eventually offers him a chance to be honest about his condition and reconsider what comes next. It is not a dramatic transformation. Banning does not suddenly become a different person or deliver a long speech about healing. That would probably feel wrong for him anyway. Instead, there is a small recognition that strength cannot always mean continuing until the body collapses. Sometimes it means admitting that something has changed. Whether the franchise would actually allow Mike Banning to retire is another question. These movies need him running through gunfire, and the character does not seem built for a quiet life. But Angel Has Fallen at least lets him feel mortal. Not completely mortal, obviously. He still survives things that would end most people before the second act. Yet for the first time, the film makes us aware that every fight is leaving something behind. That makes this Mike Banning more human than the invincible version. He is still the hero. He is still the toughest man in the room when the story needs him to be. But he is also tired, frightened, physically damaged, and beginning to understand that protecting everyone else has come at a serious cost. The explosions may be the reason people watch Angel Has Fallen. Banning's struggle with the man he is becoming is the reason this installment has anything more than explosions to offer. Gerard Butler has reached the stage of his action career where the roughness is part of the appeal. He does not look polished in Angel Has Fallen. He looks tired, swollen, irritated, and permanently one bad night away from collapsing. In another movie that might be distracting, here it actually helps. Mike Banning is supposed to be worn down, and Butler looks like he has been carrying this character around for years. There is a heaviness to him now. He moves differently than he did in Olympus Has Fallen. The confidence is still there, but it is buried under pain, frustration, and the sense that every fight takes more effort than the last one. Some viewers saw that and thought Butler looked past his prime. Others saw a more believable version of an aging action hero. I lean closer to the second view. A younger, faster, perfectly conditioned Banning would not make much sense in this story. The whole point is that the job has damaged him. Butler's face, posture, and slower physicality communicate that before the dialogue even explains it. He looks like a man who has been hit too many times and has no intention of admitting it. That is useful because Butler has never been an actor who disappears completely into a role. You are always aware that you are watching Gerard Butler. The voice, the intensity, the slightly wild stare, it all comes with him. Usually the movie just needs to find the right place to use it. Mike Banning is that place. Butler understands this kind of character. He knows how to play someone who is angry without turning every scene into shouting. He can make silence feel tense. He can stand in a room looking half dead and still give the impression that everyone else should be careful. That quality carries a lot of the film. The dialogue is not always helping him. Some lines are blunt, some are overly explanatory, and others sound like generic national security talk written to fill space between explosions. Butler cannot fix all of that, but he delivers it with enough conviction that the scenes keep moving. He rarely looks embarrassed by the material. That matters in a movie this ridiculous. The actor has to believe in the situation even when the audience knows it makes no sense. Butler commits to every chase, every betrayal, every painful injury, and every moment where Banning somehow survives something that should end the movie immediately. There is no wink at the camera. He plays it completely straight. That seriousness can sometimes make the film funnier than intended, but it also stops the whole thing from falling apart. If Butler treated the story like a joke, there would be nothing holding the action together. He gives the nonsense weight. His performance works best when the movie allows him to slow down. The scenes where Banning hides his condition, struggles with pain, or tries to speak honestly with his wife show more vulnerability than the earlier films gave him. It is not delicate acting, exactly, but it feels genuine. Butler has always been more convincing when his characters are under pressure than when they are relaxed. He seems most comfortable playing men who are barely holding themselves together. Banning's physical decline gives him a reason to bring that tension into quieter scenes. Even when he is sitting still, he looks uncomfortable in his own body. Then the action begins, and Butler switches back into familiar territory. He runs through gunfire, crashes vehicles, fights mercenaries, and throws himself into situations that no sensible person would survive. He is slower now, but there is still a brutal directness to the way he handles action. Banning is not elegant. He does not fight like someone showing off. He hits people like he wants the situation finished as quickly as possible. That style suits Butler. He has always been more believable as a brawler than as a sleek, effortless operative. There is weight behind his movements, even when the editing makes the action harder to follow. You believe that getting hit by him would hurt. You also believe that he is getting hurt in return. That gives the fights a slightly more physical feeling, despite all the plot armor. Butler sells the strain. He limps, gasps, grimaces, and looks increasingly miserable as the story continues. The movie may forget his injuries whenever it needs another chase, but Butler does not completely forget them. He keeps some of that exhaustion in the performance. The relationship with Nick Nolte brings out a different side of him. Butler becomes less controlled around Clay. The tough Secret Service image cracks a little, and suddenly Banning looks like a son who has spent years carrying resentment he does not know how to express. Those scenes are important because they stop the character from becoming nothing more than an action machine. Butler and Nolte have a messy, believable rhythm together. They interrupt each other. They argue without always saying what they mean. There is humor, irritation, and a bit of affection that neither character seems comfortable acknowledging. Butler is generous in those scenes too. He does not try to overpower Nolte, which would be impossible anyway. He lets him take the attention and reacts naturally to the strange energy Clay brings into the movie. Some of Butler's best moments are simply watching Banning deal with his father's behavior. There is a tired expression on his face that says this is not the first time Clay has made a normal situation completely insane. Morgan Freeman creates another useful contrast. With President Trumbull, Banning is controlled, respectful, and deeply loyal. Around Clay, he becomes defensive and frustrated. Around the villains, he turns cold and aggressive. Butler may not have unlimited range, but he understands these shifts. He knows what kind of energy Banning brings into each relationship. That consistency is a big reason the character has lasted through 3 films. Even viewers who do not particularly like Butler often admit that he is well suited to this role. There is something dependable about him in action movies. You know what he is going to give you: intensity, physical punishment, a lot of heavy breathing, and the expression of a man who has just learned that the situation is somehow worse than he thought. For some people, that familiarity has become a problem. They see Butler repeating the same tough guy role again and again. The comparison to late career action stars is not entirely unfair. There is always a danger that Mike Banning turns into another franchise hero who keeps returning long after the character should have retired. But Butler still has enough presence to make the repetition watchable. He is not pretending to be a younger man here. That is the key difference. The film acknowledges his age, his injuries, and his declining speed. It turns the roughness into character rather than trying to hide it. That gives the performance a little dignity. He is not running from age. He is fighting through it. Whether that is admirable or slightly depressing depends on how you look at the movie. There is also a certain roguish charm Butler brings to even his most serious roles. It is not traditional movie star smoothness. He often looks like he has just come from a difficult week and would rather not discuss it. Somehow that works for him. Mike Banning is not supposed to be glamorous. He is supposed to be reliable, the man standing closest to danger because everyone believes he will still be there when it is over. Butler sells that reliability. Even when the plot becomes absurd, you never question Banning's loyalty. The movie gives him plenty of questionable decisions, but Butler keeps the character's basic morality clear. He is damaged, secretive, and stubborn. He is also fundamentally decent. That matters because the entire frame-up story depends on the audience immediately rejecting the idea that he could betray the president. Butler has spent enough time building the character that the accusation feels insulting before Banning even responds. We know he did not do it, not because the evidence is weak, but because Butler has made loyalty the character's defining quality. His emotional performance becomes more effective because of that. When Banning realizes how completely he has been betrayed, Butler does not overplay it. There is anger, but there is also disbelief. The institution he served has turned him into an enemy. His closest relationships are under threat, and his body is failing at the worst possible moment. Butler carries all of that without making the movie stop for a dramatic speech every few minutes. He keeps it moving. That may be his biggest strength as an action lead. He knows when the film needs emotion, but he also knows that nobody bought a ticket to watch Mike Banning discuss his feelings for 40 minutes. The performance gives us enough vulnerability to care, then gets him back into the fight. Is it award-level acting? No, nobody involved seems to think it is. But it is effective genre work, and there is a difference. Butler gives Angel Has Fallen a solid center. He makes the aging hero angle believable, keeps the emotional material grounded, and throws himself into the action with the same commitment he brought to the earlier movies. Some viewers will see a star repeating himself. Others will see an actor who knows exactly what his audience expects and still finds a few new shades inside the role. For me, Butler is not the most impressive performer in the movie. Nick Nolte takes that easily, but without Butler, there is no movie. He holds the serious scenes together, gives the action a human face, and makes Mike Banning feel exhausted without making him weak. That balance is harder than it looks. The character is older now, slower too. The invincible image has cracks in it, but Gerard Butler still makes you believe that when everything goes wrong, Mike Banning is the man you would want standing between the president and whoever is trying to kill him. Even if he looks like he desperately needs a week off, Nick Nolte walks into Angel Has Fallen and immediately makes the movie feel more alive. Before he appears, the film is doing what you expect. Mike Banning is framed, the government is chasing him, the villains are closing in, and Gerard Butler is carrying the whole thing with that permanently exhausted look he has perfected. Then Clay Banning shows up. Suddenly the movie has a pulse. Clay is Mike's estranged father, a former soldier who has spent years living alone, off the grid, surrounded by weapons, traps, and enough suspicion to make normal conversation almost impossible. He is not exactly waiting at the door with a hug. Actually, he seems more prepared for an invasion than a family reunion. That is what makes the character work. Clay is funny, but he is not written like a simple comic sidekick. The humor comes from who he is. He has spent so long expecting disaster that when disaster finally arrives, he almost looks satisfied. All those years of paranoia have finally become useful. And Nick Nolte plays him with absolutely no interest in calming anything down. His voice sounds like gravel being pushed through an old engine. His face carries decades of damage. He looks like he has been arguing with the world for most of his life and has no intention of stopping now. It is a perfect fit. A cleaner, more polished performance would have felt wrong. Clay needs to look like a man who has rejected society so completely that society probably stopped checking on him years ago. Nolte does not just play the part. He seems to arrive from somewhere outside the movie. That is why so many viewers remember him more clearly than the plot. The conspiracy is familiar. The villains are obvious. The action is loud, but Clay feels unpredictable, and unpredictability is rare in this film. You never quite know whether he is going to offer Mike help, insult him, disappear into the woods, or blow up half the property. Sometimes he does all of that in roughly the same scene. The first meeting between Mike and Clay is especially good because the film does not force an emotional reunion too quickly. Mike has not come looking for his father because he suddenly wants closure. Angel Has Fallen uses that persona well, even if it does not challenge it very much. The film also benefits from not being embarrassed by its own simplicity. There are action movies that seem ashamed of being action movies. They bury everything beneath ironic dialogue, complicated mythology, or emotional speeches designed to prove the material is more important than it appears. Angel Has Fallen mostly avoids that. It gives Banning some personal problems, but it never forgets why people came. The drones arrive, cars crash, Clay blows up his property, the hospital turns into a battlefield, Banning fights the villain. The movie understands the assignment. That confidence can be enjoyable. There is something refreshingly old-fashioned about the whole thing. One hero, one conspiracy, clear enemies, loud weapons, no shared universe to understand. No complicated setup for 6 future projects. You can watch Angel Has Fallen without studying anything beforehand. Even people who missed the first 2 movies can follow it easily. Mike protects the president. Someone frames him. He has to prove the truth. That is all the preparation required. In a market filled with franchises that demand loyalty to years of connected stories, that simplicity has value. Of course, this is still a 3rd installment, and the repetition is difficult to ignore. The Has Fallen series has now placed Banning at the center of several massive attacks. Each time, institutions fail, heavily armed villains take control, and Mike becomes the only person capable of putting things right. The formula is becoming absurd even by action movie standards. How many catastrophic threats can surround the same Secret Service agent before somebody reconsiders his assignment? At a certain point, keeping Banning near the president feels less like protection and more like tempting fate. The movie cannot answer that, so it does not try. It simply asks the audience to accept another crisis. That is where personal expectations become important. Go into this looking for realism, and you will probably become irritated very quickly. The federal investigation is too convenient. The villains are too obvious. The security failures are enormous. Banning survives far too much. His injuries matter until the action needs them not to. The conspiracy depends on intelligent people repeatedly missing obvious information. The film will not survive serious logical examination. It barely wants to be examined at all. This is a press play and go with it movie. That phrase is often used as an excuse for weak writing, and sometimes it is. Audiences should not have to shut down every critical thought just because a film contains explosions. There is a limit. Angel Has Fallen occasionally crosses it. Some plot holes are not small details. They are large enough to affect the entire investigation. Certain decisions exist purely because the story needs Banning to remain isolated. The villains succeed for as long as they do because the authorities become strangely ineffective. You can feel the screenplay pushing pieces into place. That weakens the tension. A hero looks more impressive when the enemies and investigators around him are competent. When everyone else behaves foolishly, Banning's success becomes less satisfying. He is not always outsmarting brilliant opponents. Sometimes he is simply the only person making a reasonable decision. Still, the movie compensates with pace. It does not sit on its mistakes for long. Another chase begins, another location appears, and another attack forces the story forward. The momentum prevents the plot holes from completely taking over unless you are already determined to focus on them. That is one reason audience reactions are so different. Some people watch the movement, others watch the logic. The first group generally has a better time. The action itself is uneven, but there is enough of it. The drone strike gives the movie a strong beginning. Clay's property adds personality in the middle. The hospital siege provides the large final sequence. Between those major scenes, there are transport attacks, woodland pursuits, vehicle chases, shootouts, and close combat. The film is not withholding spectacle. Whether all of it is filmed clearly is another matter. The shaky camera and rapid editing make certain moments harder to appreciate. Some fights become a collection of impacts rather than a clean physical exchange. Several effects look less convincing than the movie needs them to, but the overall energy remains. Things happen. The movie moves. Banning suffers. Then more things happen. That basic rhythm is effective enough for a casual watch. Nick Nolte is the unexpected reason the film becomes more than a completely mechanical action sequel. Without Clay, this would be a much colder experience. The father-son relationship adds humor, awkward affection, resentment, and a bit of genuine emotion. It also breaks the repetition. For a while, Banning is not simply the fugitive hero clearing his name. He is a son confronting the man who abandoned him. The movie still handles that material in broad strokes, but Nolte gives it life. His presence changes the recommendation slightly. If Angel Has Fallen were only the conspiracy in action, I would probably describe it as passable and forgettable. Nolte gives it several scenes that are actually memorable. He does not fix the predictable villains. He does not improve the CGI. He does not close the plot holes. He makes the time between explosions more enjoyable. That matters more than it sounds. Morgan Freeman has a similar stabilizing effect. He does not receive the same lively material as Nolte, but he gives President Trumbull credibility. Whenever Freeman appears, the movie feels calmer and slightly more respectable. Again, the cast is often better than the writing. Gerard Butler commits fully. Nick Nolte brings personality. Morgan Freeman brings authority. Dany Huston gives the villain a professional edge, even when the betrayal is obvious. The supporting actors help the film maintain a level of seriousness the screenplay sometimes struggles to earn. That commitment is one of the movie's strengths. Nobody behaves like they are above the material. They treat the attack, the conspiracy, and Banning's situation as real. That keeps the film from becoming complete parody, though a few moments still drift into accidental comedy. And yes, some of the movie is funny for reasons the filmmakers probably did not intend. An impossible survival, an obvious villain trying to appear mysterious, a government agency overlooking something basic, a serious line delivered in the middle of complete nonsense. There are moments where laughter becomes a reasonable response. Oddly, that can improve the experience. You may laugh with Clay during the intentional jokes and then laugh at the movie 5 minutes later when the logic collapses again. Either way, you are still engaged. Perhaps that is the best defense of Angel Has Fallen. Even its flaws can be entertaining under the right conditions. The bad CGI becomes part of the spectacle. The plot holes become conversation afterward. The obvious villains let you feel smarter than the investigation. The extreme plot armor becomes almost impressive. How much more can this man survive? The movie keeps finding out. That does not make it good in the traditional sense. It makes it easy to watch with the correct mood, and mood matters here. This is not the film to choose when you want something subtle, surprising, or emotionally demanding. It is not the film to choose if shaky camera work drives you mad, or if obvious conspiracies ruin a thriller for you. It is also probably not the best introduction to what action cinema can do. There are sharper, cleaner, smarter films in the genre, but it is a perfectly reasonable choice when you want noise, momentum, and a hero who refuses to stop. Late night watch, sure. Friday evening with nothing else planned, absolutely. Rental on a large screen with decent sound. That may be the ideal situation. The film benefits from volume and scale. The gunshots hit harder, the drone sequence feels more threatening, and the weaker effects are easier to forgive when the sound system is doing half the work. On a phone or small laptop, the limitations may become more obvious. Angel Has Fallen wants to overwhelm you a little. Let it. The recommendation also depends on how you feel about the earlier films. Fans of Olympus Has Fallen will recognize the same straightforward action appeal, though this third entry is less fresh and more character-focused. People who disliked London Has Fallen may find this one more grounded and personal. Anyone tired of the franchise formula will probably see Angel Has Fallen as proof that it should have ended sooner. The movie does not reinvent the series enough to win back someone who has already lost interest. It refines parts of it. That is different. Mike is more vulnerable. The father-son material is stronger. The fugitive structure changes the usual position of the hero. The scale is slightly more controlled than the previous installment. These improvements make it easier to recommend than a completely empty sequel. They do not make it essential. That distinction is important. Angel Has Fallen is watchable. It is occasionally very entertaining. It has a few strong ideas, several effective performances, and enough action to satisfy its target audience. It is not something everyone needs to see. If you skip it, you are not missing a major development in cinema or even a particularly surprising chapter in the franchise. You can probably guess most of what happens from the premise alone, but if you watch it, there is a decent chance you will have a good time. That may sound like faint praise. For this movie, it feels accurate. A lot of films aim higher and become less enjoyable. Angel Has Fallen keeps its ambitions fairly simple. It wants tension, gunfire, betrayal, family drama, and Gerard Butler standing up one more time after he clearly should not be able to. It delivers those things, not perfectly, sometimes not even elegantly, but consistently enough. The harsher critics are not wrong. The script is lazy in places. The conspiracy is transparent. The dialogue can be blunt. The visual effects are inconsistent. The action is occasionally difficult to follow. The enthusiastic fans are not wrong either. The pace is solid. The cast is dependable. The major set pieces are entertaining. Nick Nolte is excellent. And the film understands how to keep a straightforward action story moving. Both reactions can be true at the same time. Angel Has Fallen is a flawed film that succeeds at being the kind of flawed film certain audiences enjoy. That is probably why the ratings feel so divided. One viewer sees recycled Hollywood nonsense. Another sees a reliable popcorn thriller. One person notices every impossible decision. Another is waiting for the next explosion. One leaves thinking the franchise is finished. Another immediately asks when Mike Banning is coming back. Personally, I would not defend the movie as smart, fresh, or especially well constructed. I would defend it as entertaining. There is a difference. It does not earn your admiration so much as your willingness to go along with it. The film asks you to accept the obvious villains, the impossible survival, and the questionable logic in exchange for 2 hours of action and a few unexpectedly good character moments. Whether that trade feels fair is entirely up to you. For me, it mostly does. The movie is stronger whenever Nick Nolte is present, whenever Butler is allowed to show Banning's exhaustion, and whenever the action stays clear enough to appreciate. It is weaker whenever the conspiracy pretends to be mysterious, or the dialogue starts explaining things nobody needed explained. The good and bad never fully separate. They travel together through the entire film. That leaves Angel Has Fallen in a very specific category. Not a great movie, not a complete failure, not original, not boring either. It is the kind of action sequel you may criticize while watching and still realize, somewhere near the end, that you have been reasonably entertained the whole time. Then the credits roll, the final joke happens, and you move on. You may remember Nick Nolte. You may remember the drones. You may remember joking that the final act should have been called Hospital Has Fallen. The details of the conspiracy will probably disappear fairly quickly. That is the film's real limitation. It gives you an experience without leaving much behind. For disposable genre entertainment, maybe that is enough. So the final recommendation is straightforward. Watch it if you enjoy Gerard Butler in full battered action hero mode. Watch it if you like the earlier films, especially if London Has Fallen left you wanting something a little more personal. Watch it for Nick Nolte, the drone attack, and the hospital chaos. Keep your expectations controlled. Do not expect a clever mystery. Do not expect realism. Do not expect the visual effects to look convincing every time. And definitely do not start counting how many things Mike Banning survives. That becomes distracting. Go in expecting a loud, predictable, occasionally ridiculous action thriller, and Angel Has Fallen does its job. Go in expecting more than that, and the whole thing may fall apart before the president does.